Ready.
All right. So here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are in the world. This is a very warm welcome to this very exciting session about supporting organizations in education and technology. My name is Cristóbal Co. I'm a senior education technology specialist at the bank, and I have the great privilege to support this OECD event in an area that has so much relevance for countries all over the world. We will discuss what are the different institutional arrangements that different countries have developed in the past and are currently developing or are looking forward to develop to support education and technology policies, which is something that, as we will learn, has so many different dimensions, intricacies, but at the same time plays such an important role in the world of education. And I guess many of these discussions will be shedding light on many of the lessons learned after the pandemic, where education and technology, as we all know, play really a prime time. Let me introduce our wonderful fellow panelists that will join us. Start with my dear colleague, Lucia Dellagnelo from Brazil. She is an international consultant on digital education, and she is the former Center of Innovation for Brazilian Education in Brazil. Lucia, very welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Hi to everybody.
Wonderful, thank you. Super happy. Also, I have another colleague from Latin America, my colleague Martín Cáceres. Martín is the director of the Center of Innovation from the Ministry of Education in Chile. Martín, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Cristóbal. Hello, all.
That's wonderful. So let's get out of Latin America and let's go now to Ireland. We have with us Anthony Kilcoyne. I hope I pronounced properly. He is the Division Director of EDGA in Ireland. Anthony, thank you so much also for making the time to join us today.
Thank you, Cristobal. Great pronunciation. Absolutely accurate. Delighted to be here with you all.
You are so kind and generous. Thank you so much. Now, let me tell you that during the last decades, we have seen in different regions of the world very different arrangements of how to design organizations to support education and policy. Some of them are being more centralized, some of them more decentralized, some of them are playing different roles, as we are going to learn now through the work that Lucia will present us in a moment. But at the same time, I think that these are not static organizations that have been evolving over time and they've been playing different roles. And I have to say that a few years ago, a work done by Mike Tucano and Kevin Dyke gave a picture of how these organizations are taking place in different continents of the world, but also the world has been evolving. So many of these organizations have evolved, changed, improved, and others even disappear. And I think understanding the complexities of these organizations, I want to believe that sheds so much light for the future of the education and technology in an environment which is, I don't have to tell you, changing super rapid. So before handing over to Lucia for give us a presentation, I just want to congratulate the OECD for putting to keep opening a space for having a discussion about this, because this is relevant for everyone, but this is not always a topic of conversation. So wonderful that we have this opportunity and also to learn from this expert. Let's go with Lucia, who is going to give us an overview of the work that she has been doing in this field. And then I guess we will set the whole framework for the following presentations.
Thank you, Chris. It's true, you know, since 2017, when Michael Trucano and Gavin Dykes published the work on national agencies for implementation of policies of digital education, I have been very curious about the role of these organizations and if they are really a key part of a successful implementation of digital education policies. I'm going to share my screen here with you. And I was very happy to be able to contribute to the digital education outlook with a chapter on the role of support organizations and in implementing digital educational policies. And as I said, I I was really curious about how to create effective governance structures to implement digital education policies, because as we have seen in this conference, we have seen many different projects and initiatives being developed in countries, but have not resulted in a systemic digital transformation in education and training. So it's clear now for, I think, almost everybody that we need a strong coordination of the multi-dimensions of digital technologies in education in order to be able really to promote this digital transformation. So Chris mentioned, but I have it here since 2017. I have been really intrigued about these publications. And my guiding questions was, which countries have had a sustainable process of implementation of digital policies? Not once in a time policy or something that really puts a lot of money in buying computers and distributing computers, but a sustainable and comprehensive digital policy for education. And my question is that, is there a common feature in the implementation process among these countries that have had sustainable digital education process? And I found that was one common feature was having support organizations. And then I started to investigate what roles these organizations played in the implementation process of digital educational policies. And my definition of a support organization for this work, for this chapter, was very broad. A support organization was defined as any institution within or outside the government with the mandate of implementing public policies to promote digital learning and or the use of technology in schools. The terminology changes a lot from one country to the other, but this idea of having one agency or one organization who is the leader of the implementation of the digital educational policy is that what I included in my analysis of the support organization. So you are going to see that digital education policies are very complex in nature. They require this effective coordination among multiple themes, multiple dimensions, and actors. So it's really a balance act, trying to get all these dimensions implemented simultaneously and having them have the same impact on educational systems. So it's not an easy task. It's not trivial to be able to implement a comprehensive digital educational policy. And it seems that someone has to play this role, this important role of coordination. So I look at 7 countries and I try to look at different parts of the world. Here you can see some of the organizations that I analyzed. And what I could see is that they played a very important role in implementing digital policies, digital educational policies, but they were different in nature. Their legal status is different. The roles that they play are different. But what I could find in common in all these organizations is that they were able to have these 3 different roles intertwined. They were service providers, so they were responsible for connectivity for schools, for devices, for teachers and students. Some of them are data center managers. They manage systems, both learning systems and more management systems. Sometimes they were the controllers of interoperability standards, and they provided service of maintenance of devices and connectivity for school. So there's a part of what they do that is really service provider, which is, by the way, it's very hard for ministries of education to contract and maintain service contracts with external players. The other role that they play that is very important is being an expert of digital education. There's so much we have to learn about technology in education that needs constant research and constant adaptation of curriculum and teachers training and developing standards, quality standards for digital educational materials. So there is a part and in some countries, this part is played by universities, for example, but there is a very important role of being an expert of digital education in order to provide and to inform policies with evidence and things like that. And the other role that is very important is being a leader in leading the agenda of digital education in a country or in a region, and coordinating all the different stakeholders that are involved in digital educational policies. Again, this is not an easy task because sometimes you have to work with different ministries. You have to work with the Ministry of Telecommunications, Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministries of Education, private connectivity providers, NGOs. So there are many stakeholders that are involved in the implementation of the policy. And sometimes it's very hard for a government agency or institution to be the leader and to be able to have productive and transparent, especially transparent relationships with all these actors. So when you look up, again, they are very different among themselves, but they almost all, they have the three different roles that they have to play in order to implement digital educational policies. And it's interesting to analyze that they have evolved along the time, the years. First, they were created with a focus on deployment of infrastructure to schools. So many of these organizations were created just to buy, distribute, and give maintenance services to schools. But they are evolving to become more like data managers and develop of content and teachers training, and more recently to become a leader on designing pedagogical innovations. So I think Martín is going to tell us how, for example, Chile did that and evolved from a center based on technology for education to a center of innovation in education, which is involves more expertise than just technology itself. So this seems to be a common trend among all organizations. They start as being very focused on deployment of infrastructure, and they become leaders on education, innovation, new forms of teaching and learning, using technology or not. So that seems to be a pattern on the evolution of the roles played by these organizations. And it's interesting because recently we have seen, since 2017, Michael Trucano would be interested in seeing that most of these organizations changed their nature. So they were independent organizations and they were back inside ministries of education, or they become part or a department of a general implementing agency or education service agency. And some of them, of course, maintained their independent or autonomous status linked to ministries of education with the mandate to implement, but they kept their more independent identity. Chile is a good example. Ireland, I think Anthony is going to tell us how this arrangement of the support center, the support organization for technology in education also changed during the years. And some of them, we know, for example, BECTA in England disappeared completely. So I think it has to do, when you analyze, it has to do with the level of maturity that the country has in terms of the use of technology in education and the importance that was realized or perceived to integrate digital education with other aspects of the educational policy. So these organizations have been changing, and countries are looking for the best model. And you can see that there is no one model fits all. It depends on the time and the maturity level of the country in the use of technology for education. But it's easy to see the benefits of having one organization, one support organization to implement digital educational policies. First one is focused leadership on digital education. We know that ministries of education have so much in their agenda that really digital education, first of all, it's a new expertise that not all educators working in the ministry have. So they need this leadership and they need the expertise. The second one is a sustained public funding for digital education. Again, in many countries, governments are pressured and they launch very interesting digital educational policies, but then they don't sustain the funding during the years. And we know that it's not only buying computers and distributing computers, there are many costs associated with implementing digital educational policies. And because they have this contract with this support organization is a way of maintaining and sustaining the budget and the public funding for digital education. The other benefit is expertise on the barriers and levers for the integration of technology in education, because these support organizations have been working for many years in the area. They have tried different strategies, they have tried different models, so they have a lot to learn, and they have specific expertise on how to integrate technology in schools. The fourth benefit is having a coordination of multi-stakeholder partnerships, which sometimes is very hard to do from the government perspective. I've been a government, I've worked for the government, and I know how difficult it is to maintain neutrality, but to have transparent and productive relationships with different actors, private companies that have a lot to contribute with digital educational policies, but sometimes bureaucratic barriers and make it very hard for governments to have a good relationship with private partners. And the integration of different sources of funding. These organizations, because they have their own budget, they can receive money from the government, but they can also receive money from other sources and pool these resources together to invest in digital education. So it seems that in different, of course, stages of implementation, this integration of different sources of funding is a very important component to successful implementation of a digital educational policy. And the last, of course, many policymakers now ask me, so do you recommend that every country creates a support organization for a digital educational policy? Well, it depends. There are questions to be asked before deciding if the country needs or not a support organization. The first one is, are there existing organizations in the country that are capable of performing the role of service provider, expert, and leader on digital education? Maybe it's not one organization, but you can form a consortium of different organizations that can play this role. The second question is that it depends a lot in the size of the country and on the level of centralization or decentralization of the educational system. In Brazil, for example, it doesn't make sense to create one organization capable of covering and providing services to the whole country. So you have to think about a different model for doing that. But in a small country, and Chris know a lot about that, like Uruguay, CIEB can do and is doing a wonderful job in providing these services to schools. The third question is that, does the regulatory environment allow for the creation of one organization of public interest, but with flexibility and accountability? Because if this organization is created as a public organization, maybe it will face the same barriers and the same challenges of procurement process, of relationships with private partners that the government has. So you have to look at your regulatory framework in the country and say, is that possible to create this kind of organization that is of public interest, that is going to receive public funds, but would have the agility and flexibility to conduct procurement process in a more agile way. And the last question, which is not trivial, is that, is it possible to allocate long-term funding and establish at the same time accountability mechanisms for the work of such organization? Because we want to organize one organization that is independent, that is more flexible, but would have the accountability for the successful implementation of the digital educational policy. So the question is not a simple one, yes or no, it's good or not, but it seems, and that's a very strong statement to make, but it seems that there is, in countries that have support organization, there is more sustainable and evolving and more effective implementation of digital educational policies. So I think it's one part of the governance model in the implementation process that should be considered when governments are implementing digital educational policies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucia. That's been really a masterclass on how to design and understand these institutions with a very interesting global view, moving away from the one-size-fits-all and understanding very well the nuances and how these organizations evolve. So I think in that context, it's brilliant that we will have with us now Martín, who is leading the Center of Innovation from the Ministry of Education, which we will hear from Martín, but what I've seen from as an observer is an organization that has evolved over time with a very interesting leadership. So I think it's a perfect pathway to keep still in Latin America, and then we will get back to Ireland, but to see what is the case of Chile and what can we learn from them. Martín, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Cristobal. And thank you for the presentation of Lucia. It's very, very interesting. And I think it reflects like the story and challenges that we have had in Chile. So I think we will make a great complement with what I'm going to say. We will share a presentation. I think, are you seeing the...
We see, but in presentation mode.
Yes.
Presenter.
I think there
Brilliant.
is.
Perfect.
Yes, great. It's in Spanish, the letters, but it doesn't have so many letters. Well, the organization that I lead is the Center for Innovation, more known as Enlaces. It's the same institution that it was created 30 years ago. Now we have 31 years. It was created in 1992 with the mandate of closing the gap of access in technology. The challenges 30 years ago were very different from today. And they were mainly about having computers in classrooms, in all the schools, and also to prepare teachers, professional development for teachers to be able to teach with these new computers. So it started with as a pilot program. This is very interesting. It was a pilot program in one region of Chile that was one of the poorest regions in Chile. So the vision was, in that time, was that if this works in this region of Chile that it's far from Santiago, it can work then everywhere. So it started in a very low scale, in localized, situated, preparing teachers and bringing computers to make computer labs in schools and connecting them through an intranet. It was a very interesting view. It started like that in 1992. And then it started to scale this model of professional development, and also procurement of devices and computer labs in schools. So it started to grow as a national network that it was articulated from the central level, from the ministry, in this program that was called Enlaces, and with collaboration with universities. In all the country, there were universities that provided technical support for the schools and teachers that were implementing these computer labs. So that was like the first big era of this policy, this program, starting from a pilot and then nationwide to implement these computer labs. Then a second important era was, well, we have computers now in schools, and also the computers were more ubiquitously found in society. So it wasn't only providing access to technology, but also connectivity, and also to promoting skills, digital skills. So there was a very interesting work of trying to establish what are the digital skills that the curriculum have to provide, and how to prepare students and teachers, and how to measure digital skills. So there was a second era focused on digital skills. Then, well, technology evolved, the challenges of digital skills also evolved, and there was an important change. With the vision of, well, we have technology everywhere in society, so we have to go deeper, and try to evolve to a center for innovation, to promote innovation more widely than only technology. So it was a vision that also changed the institution. Until that moment, the ministry, this unit was in the undersecretary of the Ministry of Education, and it moved to the ministry cabinet. That was the attempt. And then what happened was the pandemics. And the pandemics changed the rules, because everyone needed this. Well, we found out that the gaps that were present in 1992 were still present in the system. We still lacked of connectivity, of devices, of digital skills, and that was like a big moment of surprise, and also to realize that the gaps were not closed and the challenges were very deep, and that we had advanced in all these years, but the challenges persisted. So there was also a fragmentation in the ministry of because everyone had to provide technology and to address online learning, because in Chile we had almost 2 years of the schools closed. So all the units, the divisions of the ministry had to tackle this digital scenario. So there was a dilution of the role of the center, and it wasn't possible to move so much forward in this vision of only educational innovation. So it was like a big shock. And I had the honor to start leading this institution last year in this world, in this post-pandemic world. So I will tell you what is the present and how we are addressing these challenges. We have posted for ourselves the purpose of strengthening the capacities of innovation of the educational system, utilizing the potential of digital technologies, so that students can participate in pedagogical experiences that can make them develop in an integral and collaborative way. So we have two big strands of work in the Center for Innovation. One is educational innovation itself, and the other is digital transformation. So we have three teams of work, one that has to be with pedagogical innovation, another that has to be with infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and the other one is innovation, technological innovation. So the challenge we have is that 100 years ago, the classrooms were like that, and the future was imagined like this, right? A future with technology. This is I think you all know this image. In 1904, in Paris, different people imaginated the future, and this is an illustration of how education could be. And it's there is technological innovation there, but the classroom is the same, right? So there's the paradigm of putting contents into students' heads, and we think that the challenge is not only to put new technologies to do the same, but to promote educational innovation. Of course, addressing the gaps of technology is really important, but also we have to have a vision about it, why to do it. So we understand educational innovation as a process, as a systematic and creative and collaborative process that address situated challenges through collaboration and participation to make students protagonists of their learning processes, to understand the failure as part of a process of learning, that we have to institutionalize changes, and of course this innovation has to address learning in the whole complexity, not only discrete skills. And to do that, we have these two strands of work. One is digital transformation. We work as a first step that is basic, and we have to address it, is connectivity. We provide connectivity to almost all schools in Chile. It has been a challenge, and it's a constant challenge, because one thing is to get to schools with connectivity, but the connectivity has to be significant, and it has to be of high quality. So we have a projection and collaborative work with the Ministry of Telecommunications to do that. So that's a very big and important plan. The other is infrastructure, to provide devices to schools, to promote the use of devices, but with this vision of innovation. The other is the governance and management of data. We have lots of processes that have to be digitalized, and we can learn from data. So we are promoting that strand of work. And of course, the development of capacities in the whole system to make a meaningful use of technology. And then on educational innovation, we are promoting networks of innovation, recognizing innovations and scaling them through the second is a lab for educational innovation, to see what works and try to scale it. We have a transversal line that is inclusion and gender, and of course there's a big line that intersects technology and innovation and pedagogical innovation, that it has to be it has to do with digital citizenship we are promoting. And so those are I have 10 minutes and it's done. So we can move to the discussion then.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Martin, for keeping on the time. Suggested this is super helpful, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions coming up. And I love the fact that you started with this idea that inclusion was at the very center of the beginning of the institution. Wonderful for that. Thank you. So now let's move to Ireland with our colleague Anthony Kilcoyne, who will tell us about the Irish experience in EDGA. Sorry for the mispronunciation.
No, you're doing very well. There's many in Ireland who struggle with our pronunciation at times, so you're doing absolutely fine, Cristobal. Delighted to be sharing the platform with my colleagues from Latin America. We've a long history and tradition between Ireland and Latin America from St. Brendan the Navigator, which a long time ago, but delighted to be here with you. Thanks to and congratulations to Lucia on the chapter. It's very interesting sitting here because you're so busy in the doing that you don't often get a chance to think about how we do it, why we do it, what we do. So Lucia, it's very, very helpful, even for me, as part of the organization, as part of the chapter, to be listening to your take on it, and very, very insightful. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our organization, EDGA, the history of it, what we do. You'll hear a lot of synergies with what Martin spoke about and what was outlined to us by Lucia in the earlier piece. But just the history of EDGA is that it started out, like everyone else said there, with very much the National Centre, I should say, for Technology and Education, which came from a policy document called IT 2000. So you're going back to 1998, 99, formation of a National Centre of Technology and Education. This evolved into another
Sorry,
organization.
Anthony, can you flip the presentation because we see the presenter more? Apologize.
I can try that again. If I bring it to me here, 1 second. Just move screen.
Sorry about that.
No problem at all. Is that better?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, just move screens. Yeah, so in 2010, it moved into a teacher support service. You can see the evolution here from a focus maybe on technology and the infrastructure into a kind of combined focus in terms of pedagogy, just like Martin spoke about. And very, very recently, as Lucia said, we amalgamated with 3 other teacher and school leader support organizations into an organization called EDGA. So we are one division within an organization of 9 different areas. And our focus is specifically on the area of technology in education and technology integration. So that's a little bit of the history of us. How we do our work and the way we go about our work is, if you see there on the screen, our activity in the middle there. So our activity comes from 2 major areas. It comes from the whole policy, driver, direction, and it comes from bottom-up needs between the system and the micro level of the school level. Wrapped around that graphic, you see there, in particular in the middle at the top, the digital strategy for schools. We have a digital strategy for schools, specific to schools. This is a follow-on strategy from a previous strategy which ran to 2020, and this is a follow-on strategy to 2027. But that's deliberately aligned with the Digital Education Action Plan in terms of its time frame. And you'll see a lot of kind of synergies between what we have in our strategy and what's in the Digital Education Action Plan also. But equally around the outside of the graphic, you see other strategies that impact upon the government, but also the ministry. And maybe just be clear on what we are. We're an agency of the Ministry, of the Department of Education. We report in directly to Teacher Education Digital, so a particular section in the Ministry. We're fully funded by the Ministry, so work very closely with it, but not part of the Ministry either, if that kind of makes sense. But you see the other policies there that impact upon our work in terms of all the AI strategies, the STEM strategies, and so on. In the system piece, you also have huge change, I suppose, in terms of curricular change. That there are just some documents at lower secondary school. We had a whole change over the last decade in terms of the curriculum there and a focus on key skills. We also have a big change currently at the upper secondary school in terms of what we call a redevelopment of the curriculum areas. New subjects introduced, and you'll see one there, computer science, which particularly affects our area, but the others do too, in terms of critical thinking and politics society, in terms of digital assessment, in terms of physical education. And at primary, we also have a new curriculum that was launched earlier this year, the primary curriculum framework. And you'll see there one of the key competences in that is being a digital learner. So we're very much there's policy, there's also curriculum that's also driving our change. And then also we have the system needs. So what is the vision of the strategy, just to kind of illustrate where the focus is? It's on building that digital competence. It's on building more competent, critically engaged, active learner. That's a big piece in terms of being, we always had engaged learners. Now it's more critically engaged learners and global citizens, being able to participate more actively in a digital world than maybe previous was the case. The strategy itself, and you'll see where our work builds out of this, focus on 3 main pillars. And just like Martin had indicated there, it very much focuses now on the pedagogical piece. So embedding of digital technologies in teaching, learning, assessment. So the change you want to see in the classroom, the experience you want to provide for learners drives the innovation or the infrastructure that wraps around that. Center pillar then obviously is we need that infrastructure, we need that quality infrastructure in terms of procurement frameworks, in terms of broadband, so in terms of connectivity in schools, in terms of networks. So there's a whole support there around that. And pillar 3 talks about the digital transformation, the change that's happening, the shifting sands that we're all working with at the moment, and the need for policy innovation and research innovation. So it's very much intended to be a very living policy document. The previous strategy had annual action plans. This strategy has a midterm interim review built into 2024, and it can lead to changes in the strategy. So there's a great opportunity there. I kind of see us kind of working as the archery and the vein piece, bringing policy out to schools, but also bringing back learning into the system in terms of research and innovation. There's the 3 areas that are covered off, and it's just as you see it. There's mention of the pillar 2 in terms of funding and procurement. And some of the pieces in pillar 3, and I think we kind of nearly addressed it slightly in terms of that transformation piece, but emerging issues and what type of policy needs to wrap around those emerging issues. Our response, it's quite a complicated graphic here, but I'll just talk you through it. I think you might get a clearer picture of how we approach this. So if we think of pillar 1 was very much that teaching, learning, assessment piece, within our organization, we try to support that. We try to support the change in the classroom. So up there in the top corner, you see online CPD. So we have a whole section of our organization that provides online CPD for teachers. You see some of the areas there addressed in terms of coding, computational thinking, digital citizenship, and so on. Alongside that, we have about over 100 good practice videos because teachers like to see teachers and like to see the change in classes like mine and schools like mine. So we have 100 good practice videos that showcase activities in classrooms for teachers. Down the bottom of that screen, you see the digital technologies team. So we have a permanent staff of about 15, 16. We also have a seconded teaching staff. So leave of absence teachers that are seconded from year to year to work directly with schools. Huge resource to us. They work at a face-to-face, in-person capacity with schools. They work with teachers, school leaders, school leadership teams, clusters of schools. They work on an ongoing basis. And you can see some of the initiative that comes. So a large part of their work is working with the schools, but also about leading initiatives. I just mentioned 2 there, portfolios, blended learning, as Martin said, arising out of our experience of the pandemic. And alongside that, we have our own online repository of resources, 24,000 resources on this SkullNet. The Irish word skull is the Irish word for school. So it's a network or a repository for schools, teachers and students. And they're very importantly our curriculum aligned resources. There's always talk about the volume of resource available to schools, but these are curriculum aligned. Also, the challenge of having 24,000 resources is how do you present them? So they're in collections, subject collections, theme collections, and there's learning paths. So for a learner in a subject like politics and society, there could be a path there through a theme to help them achieve an objective that's showcased on SkullNet. You see over on the other side of the screen, the middle pillar, the infrastructure and technology integration, schools broadband. We provide that for schools. We lead that provision for schools. Schools are very, very, very high, fast broadband, I should say, in Ireland, particularly at post-primary. It's getting much, much better at primary also. And we also provide loads of support then in terms of networking, but also emerging issues like cybersecurity is what one just I mentioned there. And then all those kind of feed into pillar 3, but equally in pillar 3, we have the Irish Safer Internet Safety Centre, WebWise. So WebWise's role is to lead out on the national response to the Safer Internet Day, but also to develop resources, curriculum resources for teachers to support their digital well-being, but also support digital citizenship. And there's just 2 mentioned of them, HTML Heroes and Connected. And that's how we do wraparound supports for schools. And very, very briefly, because I know time is against us, and just very, very briefly, I want to just skip through a few slides to show you, we do create bespoke content like for school leaders. Part of Pillar 3 is very much leadership. That the biggest, I suppose, emphasis for us at the moment is all our schools are autonomous. The funding is provided directly to schools. So it's a huge responsibility and opportunity for school leaders. So we try and really, in recent times, focus in on supporting school leaders. There's some of our good practice videos you see from green screen into augmented reality. From terms of face-to-face and blended supports, I'll just go through that one very quickly. I want to come to this slide here. It just shows you some of our initiatives, blended learning, artificial intelligence for and in teaching, AR and VR. So you can see some of the emerging innovations that comes. They're experimentations. And the experimentation should either lead to recommendations. And hopefully it might be recommendations for policy. There's SkullNet. I want to show you how it's curricular aligned. You see there how that's a lower secondary school subject. It's English. The area is reading, and there's how it's broken down. So a teacher can find their way to their curriculum point through the site. There's collections. And finally, I'll just show this slide here from Safer Internet Day, from WebWise, I should say. So they have an acceptable use policy generator tool. They provide advice for teachers, online courses, but maybe final point, all our work is in supporting schools, teachers, school leaders, schools, but WebWise also have a remit for parents. And that's why I want to show the Parents Hub there at the bottom of that screen. So that gives you a whistle-stop tour of how we respond, and we align our work very much now with the strategy as well. That's deliberate. So when a school sees a strategy, they see the supports that the ministry are trying to provide to embed that strategy. Thanks, Cristobal.
Wow, that's been brilliant. Thank you for the very comprehensive approach, and also for saving some time for the team to have a discussion. We have slightly more than 10 minutes, and I would love to pick up your brain for a longer time, but we will do a little bit of an exercise of bringing some of the questions from the audience. And let me start with a quick reflection. Anthony was talking about these shifting sands, which I think is super, super representative of the work that these organizations are regularly doing. We see that many of these organizations are leading change. I mean, AI has been the topic of this year. Who knows what it's going to be next year? So very rapid technological disruptions. But we all know that the changes in pedagogy don't go at the same speed, right? So these organizations need to balance these two kind of trending forces and trying to find ways of aligning them. So I guess one of the questions I have is, for the countries that are looking at this international experience, maybe for the countries which don't have these kind of organizations, maybe it's fair enough to ask, is this a must? Should all countries aim for having this kind of entities? And if not, what is the option? What is the alternative? What other approaches you would see that is something for countries to consider if they want to go through a different pathway? I mean, Lucia was explaining that in some countries it's highly centralized, in others it's really decentralized. So that's the first question. I mean, is this a must? And if that is the case, maybe what questions should policymakers ask if they want to address many of these things as has been presented? So let's see who would like to address this one. And I have a few other questions from the audience as well, if you prefer to the next one.
May I go to that one?
Please,
because that's something that has been moving me. I think it's very important at some point to have an organization to function as a barrier, as you said, between all the innovation and disruption that is technology is creating and pedagogy. So, and a lot of people say, oh, but universities should do that. We should have universities and researchers researching the impact of these technological innovations on education. But that's a different part. I think universities are very good to produce evidence, to produce studies, but there is a difference between transforming that into policy. And you need people that understand schools, that understands the everyday activities that go on in schools in order to be able to have this analysis of what is really interesting to bring into education. I think we are in a point that I don't think it's a bad thing to be conservative. When people say, oh, education sector is too conservative, they don't want to integrate technology, but I think we have to be careful about how to integrate this technology, and we need some reflection and some analysis. So I think that for me, if you ask me what is the main role of these support organizations, is to be a buffer or a barrier between all this disruption caused by technology and educational policy. So it's like a protection of our schools and our ministries of education to have this space where people can discuss, can study, can analyze, and think about how this technology would impact schools.
Thank you, Lucia. That's super, super helpful. Anyone would like to follow up on this, or should we move to the next one?
If that's okay.
Please.
Yeah, no,
please.
That's super interesting, because I suppose that's the way we would see our role in terms of even being a not just a buffer, but a conduit between practice and research and policy development, and a conduit down towards the schools as well. Because I think for me, if for other countries, is start from where you are, obviously, and look at your own overall ecosystem. We have drivers in place in Ireland in terms of curriculum development, in terms of policy making, in terms of great research, in terms of our institutions. And then we probably see ourselves more in the enablement space of how do we bring those messages to schools? Because like Lucia said, you can't fast forward change in schools. It's a big cultural shift at times to drive it, and nor should you at times. So an organization like us allows scope for experimentation to see how something does actually work. That we know theoretically from research basis how it should work, but how it actually works in a very complex environment that a school actually is.
Fantastic. I love the idea that this is not for the sake of innovation, but is to understand what is the culture of the institutions behind. I see Martin, you wanted to say something, or should we move?
Oh, it's just that I think it's important to have like a centralized or a center that thinks about these issues, because otherwise it dilutes. And in Chile, and I think I don't know if it's everywhere. I know that in Latin America, yes, that there are constant issues that are really pressuring to have responses. So if you don't have one place that this has that is being think in all its complexity, it dilutes.
Well, you hit my next question. That's brilliant. Thank you for that. So one of the questions from the audience is exactly that. There are so many different organizations at the country level doing interesting things, right? So the question is coming, well, there's a risk of fragmentation. There's a risk of duplication. So how to tackle that? How to be sure that there is some level of coordination, or at least everybody knows what is doing everybody else. So I guess that has to do with leadership and coherence. I don't know whether you would like to share some of your wisdom for the audience on this.
Yes, maybe I can talk about my experience. It isn't easy because it depends. It is more than the institutional arrangement. I think that it can be an institutional arrangement that has a center, but if there is no leadership and willingness, not only in the leader of innovation or the digital agenda, but also from the other actors to recognize that role and to be open to hearing and to articulating, it will replicate and duplicate and fragment. So I think that it has to be with leadership, with institutionality, and also understanding of all the stakeholders to be able to work as an ecosystem in an articulated way, and that's not easy. So it's a constant challenge.
That's brilliant. That reminds me of a phrase from an MIT professor who said, if it doesn't spread, it's dead. And I think that relates a lot with innovation. Anybody would like to add any idea here?
Just to add, Chris, I think the models that I thought were more interesting was that to have a very strong unit within the Ministry of Education to provide the policy leadership, and then to have a support organization to implement this vision that is developed by the Ministry of Education. So I think there is a balance between who builds the policy, writes the policy, and implementation. And I have to say that Ireland was the only country that I saw that when designing the policy, also design the governance model for the implementation of the policy. So I thought it was very interesting, and I would recommend that to any policymaker to design the policy thinking about the governance model that would be able to really implement the policy.
Anthony, sorry, they're talking about you, so we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I just add to that in terms of, I think one of the key pieces is sometimes to get that alignment right, and to try and be clear on how you communicate that alignment is even more important. So to avoid that fragmentation, I suppose that's why previously there would have been action plans and there would have been an implementation plan to come with this strategy, because you're then publicly acknowledging or making people aware this is where the focus areas are. And I suppose people can see also that there's an evolution then in terms of innovation between plans and between activities. So it's for me, it's to raise awareness about what you're doing and to publicly report on what's being done. It can only help because there's certain things that are outside of the control then, but this helps, because we'll send a consistent message to all stakeholders in the system.
Thank you, that's wonderful. I guess we have time for a last question. So one of the things that I love from the work that Lucia presented us, this is this distinction between service providers, experts, and leaders. And I think that says a lot about how the integration of technology has evolved within our educational systems. Now, there is a question from the audience in terms of coordination for another set of things, for the coordinations in the ethical component, right? So the more we integrate technology in our life, the more aware we are of the opportunities, but also some of the trade-off in terms of privacy, transparency, inclusion and exclusion, gender bias, and nowadays we're more and more talking about the digital footprint of these technologies. So there are a number of additional coordinations that need to be addressed. So it's not only coordination to know who is innovating what, but also to be sure that there is a wellness behind many of these initiatives. So Anthony was talking about the importance of communicating the things that are taking place. But I don't know, any of you would like to discuss or share any concern? I mean, for me, a great example is, despite the massive interest in generative AI these days, a lot of communities also are saying this thing might have bias, this thing might be not representative, might be underrepresented some communities, might have hallucinations. So how we facilitate the openness to opportunities without neglecting or dismissing this other ethical component that is also very important.
I think go ahead. No, go ahead. I was
going to say, I think one of the challenges is the certainty of the evidence base is a significant challenge here. We frequently in our work, we work from a very confident evidence base, and I suppose this is a very fast evolving space. And I suppose we're looking to more move into the experimentation phase with schools with clear design principles around this. That we're looking at all. If we're looking at how the software's applications impact upon the learner environment and the learner experience, but also what needs to go with that, what other decisions need to be taken with that in terms of looking at data and privacy and all that goes there. So I think it's about moving to that kind of co-creation, experimentation piece, and being confident in the uncertainty of it, because there's a lot of answers we can't quite give just yet, but the decisions we're taking are based on very sound principles of implementation that do need to evolve with the rapidness of the evolution, like you said, of generative AI and other innovations like this.
Brilliant, thank you. Lucia and Martin, last words of wisdom. We have the last minute.
Just to say that I agree with Anthony, and I think support organizations are very important as the leaders of this discussion about care, about well-being, about safety and security in the use of technology. And we have examples among the organizations that I I study like Kenny's Net and Carrie's that are doing a wonderful job in bringing this discussion to other education actors and stakeholders.
Thank you, Lucia.
It also has to do with coordination. We work with schools, resources, professional development, but there's also a regulatory thing that has to be with normative and laws. We have now, for example, in Chile, a national policy for artificial intelligence that covers all. And it's very important that it articulates the work of the Ministry of Education with the Ministry of Science and all these laws and policy. It has to be articulated and integrated.
Wonderful. This has been a fantastic discussion. I really wish we had more time. I mean, you do an outstanding job, and based on your leadership, I think many of us have learned so much. Anthony, Lucia, Martin, thank you for your time. We will keep this conversation offline. And remember, if doesn't spread,